Hello and welcome to our webinar on gamification for compliance training. Thank you for joining us today, and thank you as well for your patience. We always give a few minutes just to let people arrive, and there tend to be a couple of glitches with the audio or with the visual on these GoToWebinar meetings as well. So if you are having any problems, please use the question facility in the panel to let us know. I know John O'Brien, who's assisting us on the technical side today, is already speaking to some of you about trying to get that fixed. But I can see that we have 45 people attending the webinar. Hopefully, most of you, if not all of you, are already on the phone line as well, and you can hear me. And if not, please do contact John through the question window. So thank you again for coming. We have a lot to cover today in the 45 minutes that we're together. I'm going to introduce myself and my co-presenter in just a moment. First of all, a little bit of housekeeping. During the 45 minutes, we would like this to be an interactive session. We have poll questions we'll invite you to answer. We'd also welcome questions from you through the question panel that is on the side of the screen. If we spot the question at the right time, we'll jump on it straight away. If we miss it, then hopefully we'll have time at the end of the session and we can circle back. Failing that, we'll be able to make contact after the session. So we can see who's asked what, so we should be able to follow up on any questions that we miss or that we don't have time for. So before we look at our agenda, and before we begin, a little bit about who we are. Contrary to the way it's laid out on the slide, I'll go first. My name is Matt Plass. I'm the Chief Learning Officer with Interactive Services. We design and we develop learning programs, e-learning, ILT, mobile learning, and our value proposition, we're known for our creative instructional design, which I think is one of the main reasons that Integrys chose us as a partner when they came to put together what will be the main focus case study of today's session, which was an online board game for compliance. Sarah, would you like to say a few words about yourself?
Yeah, this is Sara Hurley. I'm the Director of Compliance with Interys Energy Group. Integrys is a long-standing gas and electric utilities business located in the upper Midwest United States. The company also has energy marketing and compressed natural gas products and services businesses. And really our value is Integrys has provided shareholders with dividends for 72 consecutive years, so very solid. Also, I'm very happy to be joining Matt for today's webinar.
Thank you, Sarah. So we're going to begin with a question for the group. The question is, which of these best defines gamification of learning? And you may find that actually none of these options particularly suit your own view of what gamification means. We hear the word used a lot. We hear different definitions given for it. So we thought we'd start just by getting a definition that for today's meeting alone we can work to. So I think John's going to put the poll up on the screen, and when he does, you should be able to make that choice. Just give everyone a moment to answer that. Okay, I'm going to close that one out now, and you should be able to see fairly shortly the results up on the screen. Here we are. So, interestingly, I think that tallies with how we feel about this definition. People mean different things by game. The branch of math exploring why individuals make decisions is more commonly known as game theory, but I think it does, there is a little bit of confusion about this terminology. 1 and 3 are the ones we like the most. Learning that leverages game mechanics and a game with educational elements probably come closest to our understanding of what we mean by gamification, and it's those areas that we'll be focusing on today. So we're going to move on and just stop for a moment on a definition that we like of gamification. It comes from Gartner 2012. It's the use of game design and game mechanics to engage a target audience, to change behavior, learn new skills, or engage in innovation. So we read this as it's using the kind of things that you find in games, all sorts of games, to increase the efficacy of your training. And this is really the definition that we'll be working to today. There is a whole brand of game theory which is very separate from what we're talking about today, which is fully immersive, 3D worlds, classroom sessions, which is all wonderful stuff. But today, with the compliance focus, we're going to narrow down on more of the training programs that embody game elements. Okay. So the agenda for today, we've already started talking about what we mean by gamification. The real focus of today's session is around making it happen. So Sara is going to share a case study, a piece of work that we worked on as a joint team that we put together for her compliance department. And particularly, Sara's going to focus on what she had to do to make this happen in the business. It wasn't an easy journey to move from never having done anything in terms of gamification before to having a game-based learning piece out there in the business, doing well, getting great feedback. Quite a journey, and I think that will be a very interesting part of the session today. We're also going to look at how you might identify a candidate for game-based learning, particularly if, like Sara, you're in a situation where you would like to get one project moving so you can prove to the business that this is a good idea, that it works, that it engages students, and that the results are good. And we'll finish up with 4 or 5 of the things we learned as we went through this joint process together. Okay, so we started off with this definition that gamification is using game design and game mechanics to engage our audience. I think we should stop for a moment and just consider what we mean by that. And this will be a good opportunity if you wanted to use the question panel, maybe to throw out a few ideas of your own about what you think we mean when we talk about game mechanics. So what do you think we're borrowing from the world of gaming to put into educational courses? I'll just give a minute for anyone who fancies answering that in the question panel, and then of course we have some ideas of our own.
And Matt, in some of the research that I did when I was looking into this, and some of the items that you needed to throw out there when you're selling the organization on this, is you're finding that there's a lot of information out there on gamification, and that they've noticed or seen in business that it encourages learning, and it motivates people because there's an engagement that you don't get in your typical training exercises.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting looking, thank you everyone who's contributes to this. So I'm seeing Gayla says badges and rewards. Kelly's talking about using actual games, for example, Jeopardy, which I know is very popular in training. Use of points to give feedback. Simulations, Lucy suggested the use of points. Darren is suggesting that it's a more engaging experience. It avoids boring compliance learning, which is really what we aim for with the Integrys piece. I think using game elements to help you reach your goal in the business is a very good definition, actually, from Janicia. Hope I didn't pronounce that too badly. Competition, Janet is suggesting, absolutely right. Competition with yourself and competition with other learners. And the quest, the problem solving from Gayla again. So some fantastic ideas there. And here's a few that we came up with before. So I think we've mentioned some of these already. But these ideas that you might have to complete a task against the clock, that there could be a story, that you might have to accrue points, that you'll receive recognition, you'll have a sense of your progress, you're going to advance up through levels. You might unlock new information as you go, you'll complete challenges. And I think some of the game playing means around replayability, it's an enjoyable experience and it's one you're happy to go back to. Perhaps an element of chance, perhaps an element of peril, lives that you could lose, energy bars that might deplete if you make too many wrong answers or take too many wrong turns. And of course, the great thing about games is you receive continual, endless feedback. You're always receiving feedback about the experience that you're having. So that's very useful, and thank you everyone for your contributions there. Okay, so I think to round off on what we mean by gamification, we're really saying, in terms of this seminar today, in terms of what we're going to show you as our case study, we're not talking about games that encourage learning. They're wonderful and they're out there, but what we're really focusing on today is more a learning experience that feels like a game. And the reason that that's difference is significant is particularly around compliance. However much you would like to create game-based learning, you still have to track who's taken it, you have to score who's taken it, and for most organizations you cannot allow an open-ended experience. You need to guarantee that the experience will last 15 minutes or 20 minutes or 30 minutes or 1 hour, depending on the compliance requirement and depending on what the business will stand. So we really are talking about these learning experiences that borrow game elements, but you still maintain control over the situation. It's worth mentioning as well that if we're looking for the benefits of gamification, here's one. If we think about where people play games, the answer really is everywhere. We play them at home, we play them at work, we play them on the move, and we play them in social situations as well. So if you're looking for a way to reach your learners wherever they may happen to be, there's no better way than some kind of a game. And I think the cards in the top left here refer actually to almost a byproduct of the online board game we created with Integrys, where they created some physical playing cards that backed up some of the ideas that we presented in the online course. Before we move on, we'll just have a quick look at what other people have said about gamification and its benefits. This is useful ammunition if you're about to embark on your first gamification project within your organization. It's useful to see that other people are doing this. It's useful to see that other people think that it's a great idea. My favorite quote here really is the gamification may be the most important commercial and social development of the next 50 years. And I think that really refers to the fact that games are now so embedded in the way people engage online in all sorts of areas, particularly on their smartphones and on their iPads as well as on their desktops, that it's where communication and learning is already happening, and we want to be part of that.
Right. My favorite in this case is the games create engagement, the cornerstone of any positive learning experience. And what this one really means to me is you don't want learners to phone it in. You want them to have to think when they're putting this together, because then you have the retention that you're looking for on what you're training. So really creating that engagement for the learner.
Absolutely. Okay, that's a nice quote. If you're putting your proposal together, gamification is a Trojan horse. You can read into that what you will. Okay, so we'll make this deck available to anyone who needs it afterwards. And again, this is a very useful slide if you're trying to sum up what gamification means and how it's quantified within a course. So you can break it down into these 4 buckets. If you're talking about a learning experience that feels like a game, you need to think about these 4 areas. First of all, there's the mechanics. What does it actually do? And that could be storytelling, it could be responsive objects, things you play with, things you are rewarded with, access being granted as you move up through the levels, and then the feedback you receive. The second section is the measurement, not just the measurement of score and competency as you would find in a typical training course, but also of reputation, performance, quality, and time. How quickly can you complete these tasks without dropping quality? Behavior, when we talk about games, we're looking for loyalty, mastery, quality, and engagement. And then the reward moves beyond a high score and into recognition, status, access to new areas, access to new toys within the game, and stuff, things you can collect, and possibly even a reward mechanism within the organization that literally rewards success with a voucher or with an opportunity, which I know a lot of organizations are doing. So if you do take advantage of taking this deck after the session, this is a valuable slide. Okay, so we're going to move on to looking at making it happen. This is really Sarah's piece. She's going to explain a little bit about the background to the piece of work we did. We'll have a look at the game online, and then Sarah will walk through the process she went through. A couple more polling questions just to get us into the right frame of mind. I'd be very interested to see the extent to which your organization has embraced gamification so far. So John, if you could open that polling question, we'll just get a sense of where people are with this one. That's great, thank you. So very interesting, and again, that tallies with what we're seeing across the industries we work in financial services and retail and pharma and others. Very, very few organizations would say it's a core part of the learning strategy, and for the ones who are, congratulations, you are ahead of the game. Most of them do split the way it's split here between organizations that have dabbled but have no clear game learn strategy and organizations that are yet to try gamification of learning. What's interesting here is partly that hopefully this session today, particularly for the people who have yet to try gamification, and certainly Sarah's story and the perspective she brings, there are many obstacles in the business to getting that first game learning experience out into the business. And when you have had that first success, there's certainly some thought that can go into how you capture the success and you market that internally so that the dabbling becomes more of a learning strategy. But thank you for your input there. That's very interesting to see. So we're going to move on to another question. Based on the fact that only 8% of us think that we have game-based learning as a core part of our strategy, what do we think are the greatest obstacles to gamification? And again, John, if you could put this poll up, this would be a useful one to see as well.
I'll be really interested in what the results of this question are because, you know, our greatest obstacle, we're a fairly conservative utility business, was convincing leaders that gamification did not trivialize the subject matter being tested and being trained on, and that this training would be an effective method to go forward with.
Absolutely. Okay, let's take a look at these. So that's fascinating, and again, it very much ties in with what we've seen before. So really, the issues here are convincing senior management and getting the design right, and that's absolutely right. Interestingly, only 5% have said that convincing the learning population is an obstacle. I've seen it be an obstacle, but most often I've seen it be the very opposite. The learners are crying out for it. They're very easy to convince that it's a good idea. Not always, but usually they are. But that senior management can be difficult, and it's very easy to get the design wrong. It's very easy to come up with a design that ends up taking up too much of the business's time, too much of the business's money, with not enough of a return. And a couple of people have said here that satisfying the regulators that training has taken place can also be an issue, and I think that happens when people forget to build in the robust training, tracking, scoring mechanisms that you would typically find in training courses. Just because it's a game doesn't mean it doesn't have to track and score properly. Okay. By the way, I'm seeing some interesting questions coming in here, so I think hopefully we'll have a couple of minutes at the end and we can certainly take the conversation offline if we need to. So we're going to take a look at the case study now. Sarah, do you want to just position this before I open up the course and we have a look at the online course that we did?
Oh, absolutely. The Integrity case study, you know, one of the pieces that we were working with is that we're having almost half of our workforce in Illinois in the United States. Integrys had a requirement to provide alcohol and drug policy training. So with the requirement, we wanted to make sure that if you have mandatory training, that you really make it meaningful and valuable. You only have so much time. We have almost 5,000 employees. So to take that much time and much people away from their work, we wanted to make sure that it was valuable. For that reason, we pulled in 3 additional key policies to train on. And we're a conservative utility business, so you know, going in a new direction was also something that we had to think a lot about. We had several objectives we wanted to meet when pulling together what ended up being integrity. We wanted to grab the attention of the learner. We were hoping that by grabbing their attention, we'd have higher retention rates for the material that we were training on. Also, we realized that policies may not be the most exciting material to be trained on. Not only did we want learners to have a better understanding of the corporate policies that we were rolling out here, but we also wanted to create policy awareness overall. And with task trainings, we had a lot of learners that would go and skip to the end of the training to do a knowledge check. And if they did that, they completed it and had to check the box type of thing. Really wanted to do something different, and so what Integrity ended up being was that the knowledge check was the training, but we'll get into more details on that. Also wanted to maximize the value of the training by reducing seat time. Average time that we wanted to go for was about 20 minutes. It wasn't too much, too little, and also could efficiently be put into the day for a lot of our employees. We also needed to be able to track completion and view what areas learners were struggling so that we knew what we needed to train more on or have more awareness around. And we also wanted to get the message out there. Compliance training doesn't have to be boring. It doesn't have to be dry. It's basically knowing the rules and why they're out there. So with that, I'll move on to the next slide on our road to building the integrity what we had. And really what I described was we had a need for training. And what we wanted to do with that is we were looking for a bunch of different options because I need to build our compliance and ethics compliance library, in essence, for training. And so we had already been looking at a bunch of different options, vendors, internal, what did we want to do for this? In our research, we identified Interactive Services, and Interactive Services had provided us with a sampling of the trainings that they had created for other companies. And although, we didn't go with Interactive Services right away, I remembered them from a year later, and some of the training that they pulled together, I'm like, oh, we got to go look at that again and get a quote and pursue it from that avenue. I remember being really impressed with what we saw, and so that's why we pursued them. Selecting Interactive Services was easy from our standpoint because, we knew that we were going to see a great product. They had a project plan methodology that was not something we saw with all vendors, and they were willing to work within our budget, so that was great. The tougher thing, though, because selecting Interactive Services as our vendor was easy, the decision to do gamification wasn't that easy. I knew it was a huge risk for our organization. Our organization has been doing the same type of training for years and years and years. I was thinking that we'd have some pushback, which we did. I know that not everyone likes games, and I was worried that it wouldn't be taken seriously. Games are supposed to be fun, but the subject matter still needs to be taken seriously. And the biggest item was it's change. It's different. It's something that we hadn't done before. So what I did when I was approaching this is, after I made the decision and had to then go to my leader to get them to buy in, is I didn't necessarily describe it as a game when I was talking about it, but rather the fundamentals of the learning concept and how to engage learners, having them be part of the training. My leader wasn't excited about taking all the risks of rolling out this type of training for the organization, to be honest with you. And so I needed to find partners throughout the organization to secure funding for this project. And because we had several different policies that we were looking at, which are actually owned by other areas of the organization, I didn't necessarily have to sell them on the gamification or doing game for the training. It was more on what their need or what they were looking for. So partnered with human resources, physical security, and information technology. And human resources, they were already on board. They wanted to do something different. They were looking to actually take this opportunity. Physical security, the game was a highlight for them. What they were more excited about, though, was that this was mandatory training, and so it would be going out to all of our employees. And then information security, data protection being such a huge item, they were very interested in creating more awareness around this. So selling on the actual format of of the training wasn't the big thing. It was really looking at what they needed to accomplish. So the design part, now this is the fun part, and we had a really good time pulling this together. It wasn't your typical training that you're putting bullet points together. This actually was a lot more fun for a process. So why don't we do a quick demo of the integrity game at this point?
Let's do that. So I'm just going to close this down and open up the game itself. Okay, so if I walk through quickly what we're looking at, and then Sarah, I think, can give a little bit of color about why it works for Integrys. So the central concept here is that you're playing an online board game. So we borrowed from various board games that we were familiar with some of the paradigms that we know work very well in those kind of games. There's a board that the learner's going to move around, and there are different elements which I can explain as we get into it. So when we click Start, the first thing that we get to do is we get to choose our player piece. And you'll notice that everything we see in this course is relevant to the company. So it's either iconographic, or it's on brand, or it's representative of the industry that they're in. So in this case, we're going to select a player piece. I will select the truck. Here we are. So now we can see that the truck has landed on the start square over on the right-hand side here. We're going to make our way around the board, and as we do, we're going to encounter different kinds of squares. The squares are going to show us videos or put us into scenarios, or they're going to ask us questions. And all the time, we have to try to progress. The reason we need to answer the questions correctly is that up in the right-hand side, we have this riskometer. And the more questions we answer correctly, the lower our risk level will be. The more mistakes we make, the higher the risk level. So this is a good example of how a game can be fun without necessarily needing to be non-serious. This is about reducing risk, and it's about making sure that you are staying on message with the policies. The policies, by the way, all live up in this resources section. And the idea is that while we wouldn't expect someone to read and necessarily recall everything from a policy, they can use it as a reference tool. Get too many questions wrong, too many strikes over here, and you end up in jail, and you have to get out of jail, which obviously is borrowed from Monopoly. So we're going to roll the dice. When we roll the dice, it shows us which squares are available to us on the board. And if we move on to a star square, a question appears from the pack, and we answer the question. We receive instant feedback, and that feedback has affected our risk level. You can see up in the top right, this is flashing because we've just reduced our risk level by getting it correct. I'm going to roll again. This time I'll move on to a video square. Now we're going to watch a video, and then we're going to respond to it. So the question will be asked is all around responding to that video. I'll turn the sound up. I'm not sure how well it will come across the webinar, but just so you can get a sense of what the experience would be.
Successfully answer a question about this topic and reduce the risk.
So ethics comes first, right? And then you talk about compliance. I like to tell people we don't comply for compliance sake. We don't comply to avoid fines and penalties. We comply because compliance is part of delivering on our responsibility for safety, for reliability.
Okay, so we're presenting a video, and this is an expert video that we're working through. Having worked through the video, we're going to answer a question on that, and it will move us on to the next stage in the game. So I'll roll again, and we'll see if we can show a scenario square. They're a little bit different. In this case, we're going to meet some individuals who are in a situation. They need an answer to their situation, and we're going to help answer a question to get them out of trouble and to reduce the risk in this scenario.
They've worked together for a few years now. They're good friends. In fact, they often get their two families together for barbecue. But Frank is starting to feel concerned about Jesse and is worrying about what to do. About a month ago, Frank noticed something was wrong with Jesse.
So we're going to walk through a series of conversations between these two guys.
Jesse seemed a lot better. A few weeks later, Frank confronts Jesse about a concern. Frank's worried. Now that you've learned about Frank and Jesse's scenario, try answering the question correctly to reduce the risk. But get it wrong, and you'll add a strike to the strikeometer. Substance abuse in the workplace can create problems that may impact you and the company. What can Frank do to help Jessie with her substance abuse problem?
Okay, so turn the music down again. So you've seen there are three different types of questions that you encounter as you work your way through the board. One of the things I should point out here is that the dice is rigged. We will not let you get stuck in this game. So if you need a 5 or a 6, you're going to get that 5 or a 6. If you need a larger roll or a shorter roll in order to finish the course, that's what we'll make sure you get. So without being too prescriptive, we do ensure that the seat time is limited to the 20 to 30 minutes that Integrys can allow their employees to take. So what's interesting about this course is it's essentially a game menu sitting over the top of a fairly traditional learning engine. It's presenting you with information, it's asking you questions, and every question that you answer, whether it's a video square, a scenario square, or one of these cards here, or a question to come out of jail, is tracked and scored, and that's what gives you the compliance tick in the box that you need. So what I'll do now is I'll just hand over to Sara, because I think she has some color to give around this.
Yeah, exactly. This was some of our key objectives and functions for the training, and it will help answer some of the questions that have come through as well, is we really want to engage the learner. This isn't passive learning, but it's active learning. They actually have to go and click and touch and look at different things. Also, it's 12 questions that they have to, 12 questions that they have to answer correctly in order to complete the game. So it's 100%. And it has the 3 different types of questions out there. So there's different styles and there's different looks. We have the videos, the scenarios, the multiple choice, and true and false questions. So it's not one-note type training. That was very appealing. Also, for the question that came up, what do we do when we have special needs? Well, in our case, we actually have employees that need to do classroom setting. It's easier. We don't have PCs available for all of them. So we have this created into workbooks. It's not as flashy, it's not as interactive by any means, but it was an alternative that we needed to do for that subgroup of our employees so that we had something available for them. And also ones we had to have transcripts written for some of the videos for the ones that are hearing impaired as well. The other items that this had that we really liked was the videos, which featured, that's our CEO, Charlie Schrock, reinforced the tone from the top on this training because that was really important. And then the learner was able to see their progress, which is obviously with that riskometer up in the corner of the screen. That's pretty neat as well. We were able to determine which questions learners are not able to correctly answer. This was the target training in the future. So we could see which of these questions that came up. Actually, the true and false and multiple choice ones, there's behind there, they only have to answer 5, but there's a series of 42 different questions that come up. The other nice thing about this, which it doesn't show here, is when the next time you take it, it's not necessarily that the answer is going to be B every time. It will switch to D or C or A or whatever. The other thing, I don't know if you can't tell from this necessarily, but this is personalized for Integrys. This is our training. We can see that through our game pieces, which represent our business products and services. And the center of the game board is actually our regional landscape. So having that personalization, and the name of the game, Integrity, also of our name, Integrys. And to be honest with you, providing training in a concise manner. Seat time is averaging a little over 20 minutes. I think that's perfect for this. And plus, we know that in order to complete the training, they have to have 12 questions correct in order to have the system tell them that they're complete, they're done, they won the game. So those are some of the dynamics that were pretty important to us with that training. and how that worked out.
Fantastic. Thank you, Sarah. Okay, so I'm very conscious of time, and we've had several really good questions in that I think we should try and get to before the end of the session. So, Sarah, did you want to just finish up briefly on how you rolled it out to leadership and the beta release to the CEO? Because for anyone who's thinking about doing their first piece of gamification, I think it's a useful model to follow.
Right. Rolling out the training was maybe where panic set in for me, and we really wanted to have, it was a team that worked on this. This isn't just a one-man show. I wanted to have a methodical rollout for the organization, knowing that this is different, this is change. Wanted to make sure that we were rolling it out in a manner that would be most accepted. So what we did to have that happen is we did a beta release to our CEO and got his feedback, and so that we were able to tailor the rest of the rollout. You know, his overall comment was a good experience, a great way to take the training. We were able to incorporate his constructive feedback when we rolled it out to the rest of the leadership team. We also had his buy-in, which was pretty key when you're rolling out something that's a fairly significant change. The next piece that I think was key for this training to be successful was rolling it out to all leadership within our organization. And the reason we did that is because, for one, we wanted them to be able to see it before their staff did. We also wanted them to be helping us troubleshoot and really have that understanding of what is the seat time on this, what are the expectations that they can have of their employees as they're going through this. We've done now fairly almost all the rollout for all employees for the organization. We're planning to be done by the end of this month. And you know, we get the positive and the negative feedback. Negative you get right away because people want to, but we've gotten an overwhelming amount of positive feedback on this, which is not solicited. We do have a survey at the end, which will be compiling that information once we complete the training. And right now, that's all looking very positive. I'll just quickly, because I know we only have a couple minutes here, is, you know, some of the feedback that we've gotten is the concept is pretty neat. Pick a token, roll the die, and play the game. Great concept. The game idea is novel, and that was from a supervisor. The Integrys game is a fun way to get the compliance message across. I mean, we've had tons of feedback on this. And then just kind of wrap up. We're not full of the whole process of this. We're going to be wrapping up hopefully near the end of May. And having gone this route, I definitely would have done it again. You know, I may have made it a little bit simpler concept, maybe, you know, more Jeopardy than Monopoly, but I'm really looking forward to what we go forward as an organization, knowing that this was a big leap for us and having such positive feedback.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you, Sarah. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to jump straight to the end pretty much now, because I think we want to get to these questions because they're very useful. If you do take the deck, you'll see some questions we think you should ask to select candidates. You'll also see some examples where we've created gamification experiences with other companies. We did some for Comcast, a home safety experience with AXA. Walmart was about customer service simulations. And we did a spy story mission for Visa and complete 5 levels of the game. And we just wanted to end for you with 5 things that we think you should remember from this session. The first one is it's a course that feels like a game, and I think Sarah's point that the average seat time for that game is 20 minutes is very important, because the business doesn't want people playing games if that means they're away from their work for hours and hours. Pull in those competitive elements. Be prepared to cheat to manage the seat time, so be prepared to rig the dice. Don't let the learner get lost in the game. They always need to be able to find their way to the end quickly. And the most important one, in a way, gaming's fun, but it doesn't have to be funny. It doesn't have to be silly. It can be serious. So let's have a look at some of these questions now, and I'll start off with these, and Sarah, you can jump in if you have anything particularly interesting there. So let's have a look. So I think we've got a question here from Darren who says, we have bandwidth issues with 50 countries where they have operations. Course and file sizes can be an issue. How can that be addressed? I mean, I think Sarah already spoke to them actually by saying that they came up with almost a paper-based, very low-tech version of this. The course that we looked at today in the case study is built with Flash. It would require a reasonably high bandwidth to play, not necessarily broadband, but if you're taking this out to 50 countries, I'm guessing some of those countries have very low bandwidth. A lower spec HTML version would play a lot better on the bandwidth, and what you might do is you might remove the video and you might replace it with a slideshow or some other way of presenting that information. I think the next question we have is from Janine. Gamification seems easier for HR courses. What success have we had with technical training? I think the success with technical training comes when the technical training either requires working under time pressure or working under the pressure of other requirements on your day. So the training itself, the technical training, perhaps is not best suited to gamification unless it's valuable to add a time element and against the clock element. So perhaps they have, in the case of Comcast, where we've done some gamification with them, they had to wire up the TV to the set-top box to the the Comcast tools, and they had to do that within a certain amount of time because that was the customer expectation. How long did the design process, and Gail is asking, how long did it take to do the design and build process? Sarah, I think you've already mentioned here it's approximately 3 months end to end. Is that right?
Yep, end to end is approximately 3 months. That was everything from legal review to beta testing to site testing. That was the whole process.
Yeah. And so Gail also asked what authoring tool or game environment did we use. This was built in Flash. We've also built games in HTML, which, as we mentioned before, have a low bandwidth. But there's also classroom games that can be played, and a lot of these games can be turned into a very, almost a paper-based version for the classroom. How do we develop something that can be accessible for persons with visual impairment, i.e. using a JAWS screen reader? Well, interestingly, I don't think that this example we've shown you does. It would need to be an HTML course to do that, to work with JAWS. And other 508 pieces. I guess the quick answer there is it can be done, but you're adding to the development time and potentially the cost, unfortunately, to make it fully 508 compliant. Do you set the game up so people play against each other? Yes, and interestingly, the feedback we get most often on these games is where we haven't put in a competitive element between players, they ask us if we could. That's something that can be done. Technically, it's possible. You set up a leaderboard and you allow people to submit their scores. It's not always desirable, but it's certainly possible. Let's have a look. Gail is asking if you're able to see a demo of this game. If you mean, could you take a longer look, then absolutely. If you, John will be able to contact you afterwards and we can make a demo site available for you with some examples. And another question from Gayla, where do they access transcripts? Transcripts are kept separately as documents or as pop-ups on the screen, and whether we're developing in Flash or HTML or HTML5, always the transcript is available to the learner. We have another question, would this type of training work on all LMS systems, Saba, Plateau, etc.? And the answer to that is yes. So all of these games, in order to be tracked and scored, they have to be SCORM or AICC compliant, so they would work on 99% of systems. Sorry, Sarah, I'm rattling through these, so please jump in if you have any thoughts.
Yeah, no, go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay. So the level of audience participants and how many took it, this is from Keith. Hi, Keith. Sorry, I know Keith, that's why I'm saying hi. So Sarah already answered this. All levels within the organisation are taking the training. 2,500 employees have taken it so far. Feedback's been very positive. Average seat time has been 20 minutes. Okay. And Mark, a nice comment from Mark saying it's interesting that the learner does not need to leave the main screen. Didn't feel overly complex, made it very compelling. Thank you, that's nice feedback to have actually. Can it be played on mobile devices, iPhones or iPads? Well, this one can't because it's developed in Flash. Other versions in other technologies could be designed for the iPad. That would need to be built in adaptive HTML or in HTML5. Or using one of the tools like Storyliner, though you might reduce the gameplay if you use one of those off-the-shelf tools. Question from April, do you have any part of your design process that includes unconnected employees, as in taking the design of the electronic course and turning it into something instructor-led? In this case we showed you today, that's not how it works, but using a game as part of a blend where there's an online component of the game and then there's an in-class component to the game will be a fantastic red thread through a blended program. So that's a great idea.
We actually had instructors that take this, they took this game board and they did it in a classroom setting to some extent and had the participants, you know, kind of raise their hand to answer questions and such. So we did have some classroom type of settings for this training as well.
Yeah, and it's interesting. So some games, if they're designed suitably, can be run and the whole class can participate. So the facilitator can ask the class to vote on which door they should open or how to answer the question or which square they should move to next. And it can become a fun group activity if the group is nice and small. So we've only got a couple of questions left. The next one was, have we run into adoption issues with certain audiences, e.g. age, education? I'd say we have, not so much based around age or education level and not so much around the learner audience, but as Sarah mentioned earlier, around some of the leadership audience and the legal compliance audience, convincing them that a game can be fun without having to be silly. I think that's a conversation that we've had several times, and that question came from Tammy. Hi, Tammy. Okay. And the last question I think we have today is, how do you handle translation into multiple languages? Is it part of the development timeline? We handle it exactly the same way we'd handle with any piece of training. The localization comes, in our case, after the piece of training or the game has been launched, or at least has been completed and signed off, and it would go through the same localization and translation process that any other piece of online training would. So it's probably not part of that 3 months we mentioned for this development, but it would be part of the ongoing development timeline. Okay, so I'm going to call time on this now. Thank you so much for your participation. The questions were excellent. If anyone would like to see some of the demos of perhaps some of the pieces that we didn't have time to show you properly today, we're happy to set that up. We are also happy to send this deck out to anyone who requests it, and you can do that either through the question facility or by replying to the advert you had to John O'Brien. Thank you very much for attending. It's been a real pleasure. And Sarah, did you have any final thoughts?
No, I really appreciate this. It was good to see the feedback from the participants on the different polling questions. It helped validate where I thought things were. So thank you.
Yeah, thanks everyone, and thanks to John O'Brien for running and setting up the webinar today. And I hope we'll see you on the next one. Goodbye.